Jack Welch has once said, "Before you are a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others." Mr. Indika Prematunga, who became a group CFO of one of Sri Lanka's largest shipping companies at the age of 27 and then CFO of one of the country's largest public quoted insurers by the age of 30, was indeed a success story. In fact, he was the youngest winner of People Leaders Awards in Finance in 2015. He later pivoted his career from being a successful corporate finance professional to a serial entrepreneur, which enabled him to serve more as a leader and grow others. Let's see what we can learn from him. Come, let's go. Thank you for accepting our invitation and giving us the opportunity to interview you.
Good evening.
So to begin with, you came to Colombo from Mathura. So for us to understand, can you briefly explain about your childhood, your family background and the journey so far?
Okay, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I'm from Mathura, living very close to the main city of Mathura, living nearby the school. My parents were government servants. My father was a technical assistant attached to irrigation department and my mother was a supervising dental therapist. Until my advanced level, I was in Mathura. I have one brother and sister, both are graduates. In the school time, I was involved in both swimming and football. I was member of the school swimming squad and the football team as well. And I'm a 1 mile swimmer. And yeah, then up to O levels, I didn't take the studies very serious. And then at A levels, I did it really well, and yeah, that's about my childhood.
What type of personality did you have as a schoolboy?
Very aggressive, especially I would say up to O level, it was very aggressive. Like with a lot of friends, especially I was living very close to school. Like my like home was about 100 meters away from the school, and our home was like the hotspot where everyone comes there, before they go to school, they come to our place. So around 7:20 we leave our place and then go to school. And then towards the latter part, towards advanced level and the O levels, sometimes halfway through we come back and then stay at our place, eat and then do many things, go and have a sea bath 10 times and then go back to school, things like that. It was very aggressive,
So who was your childhood role model?
In terms of professional, that's my uncle. That's my father's brother who was an accountant. So by that time he was living in Zambia and then he moved to Australia. So then after doing my O levels, I also wanted to be an accountant by looking at him, by seeing his success. So I also want to be an accountant. That was my initial ambition. I never planned to be an entrepreneur, but wanted to be an accountant.
What was the turning point in your life, or did everything happen as you planned?
It's a bit of a long story. My corporate career, if I say, started at Suntel as a trainee, and after that I moved to a finance company. That time, it was purely luck. When I was 25, by that time it was the largest finance company in Sri Lanka, and I was offered as a treasurer. So it was a very responsible job. Managing a treasury is not easy, especially at 25. So I took that challenge without thinking twice. I just took it. Usually I have that aggression, so I just wanted to take it and I took it. That's how I do it. I take the challenge and then see whether I can perform or not. So I accepted and then I performed really well. And then after that, again I got opportunity to work for a shipping company. You have heard Sea Line, the Sea Line group of companies. When I was 27, I was the group CFO. There were 22 companies, including 5. They were managing 5 container vessels, and they were number 1 in ship crewing. I never applied for these jobs. I just headhunted and got these offers. Then I moved into Union Assurance. That was a public quoted company, one of the largest insurance companies in Sri Lanka, as a CFO. Then again, by that time I was about 29, and then after that I was again headhunted by AIA, which is a multinational. By that time it was Aviva NDB as a CFO. That I wouldn't say I have much plan. It's basically hard work and then accepting challenges and deliver whatever it matters and then deliver everything. But after that, being an entrepreneur, it has happened partly, I would say, a bit of planning, because as an insurance CFO, I had a friend, Vipula, who was the HNB Assurance CFO. So he was also very young. So we traveled together every year, because if I remember, from 2012 to 17, for annual reports, we were within top 3 in Sri Lanka, not only the insurance sector, but across all the sectors. Not only in Sri Lanka, but even in South Asia, we were within top 3. Myself and Vipula, we both, like, that is Union Assurance and HNB Assurance, we were both. Across the sectors, we were within top 3. As insurance CFOs, we had something called Insurance CFO Summit, which was in Hong Kong and Singapore again. So we should travel a lot. Then we have seen things different, especially in Singapore. We have seen things differently, okay? How the things are happening there in Singapore and Hong Kong. And we saw a different world. If I remember right, when we were attending one CFO Summit, there was a gentleman who came for a presentation without a jacket, just in a denim and a shirt, casual shirt. And he was sharing a success story about a company called Direct Asia. It was a direct insurance company. Direct Insurance, it's a pure online insurance company. And accidentally, he's an accountant. He was an accountant in the industry, insurance industry, and then he wanted to start the business. He came out, stepped out of the job, from a comfortable job as a CFO, and then started this company, Direct Asia, and he ran it for, if I remember right, 7 or 8 years, and sold it at a huge sum of money. And he said, now I'm a free man, I don't want to work anymore. And like people were saying, like we have seen the online market. He said, now in Sri Lanka, why can't we do this? We should do this. And we had this thought for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then all of a sudden one day we decided, right, we are going to quit the jobs. We are going to start an online insurance intermediary. It's called Aggregator, online insurance aggregator in Sri Lanka. We just have started without thinking. We step out, and like when you are leaving, everybody said, don't do it. Like, you have a good career. You will to be the next insurance CEOs and this and that. But we decided and we just quit, and then started in insurance. That's how it happened. It was a bit planned. Yeah.
As you know, leaders are born or made is debatable. What are the leadership characteristics that are coming within you?
I know from my school days, I was a good team player, and I was good in managing teams as well. So probably, working in teams, leading them is definitely one thing, and bit of aggression, which I was born with. I don't know whether aggression is really needed for being a leader, but bit aggressive by nature. When I was doing my A-levels, I was helping my friends for their studies. So I really knew how to grow people, how to take them with me, without letting them go. Yeah, those are the things, as a corporate leader, even I believe in really making teams. Because at Union Assurance, I got about 4 people from audit firms as managers, and I'm very happy to say out of them, about 3 are now CFOs and 2 are insurance CFOs. Straight after leaving Union Assurance, they joined other companies as CFOs. I'm so glad that, right? They came from audit firms. They were with me for about 3-4 years, and then with that training, they just moved out as CFOs. So be with people, managing the teams, coaching them, taking them to the next level was, I would say, my leadership abilities. Yeah.
That's great to hear. We heard that you are a PIM alumnus. So what are the areas that you developed through the academic career?
To be very frank, from PIM, the best thing I got was the network. The people who, joined with me, because I was very young. I was lucky enough because since I had a first class for my degree, I straight away, just after the degree, I started the MBA. So all my colleagues were little bit senior to me, and they were holding senior positions in the industry, in the various industries. And especially the experience, from corporate experience, it was a major thing. And academically, I would say you won't be able to apply the specific knowledge to a given situation, but without knowing, you have back of your mind whatever that you have learned. So it helps in critical decisions, certain cases like them handling conflicts. So you know their characters, you know what their preferences, what kind of a conflict it is, and the teams. When you're managing teams, the theoretical background helps.
How would you describe the term leader? And any industry examples that you could tell us for a perfect leader?
A leader is someone who won't let down the team and who will take the team forward and who wants to see his teammates performing better than him one day. For me, that's a real leader. And always you have to coach them, and when they're in trouble, you have to be with them and you have to be for them, right? And never let them go. So and you should be happy to see they go past you and perform better than you one day. If you honestly believe in that, the team will work for you.
So what do you think are the factors that create a good leader?
You should feel for the others. A lot of empathy. If you can't understand others' feelings, if you can't understand your teams, their feelings and their characteristics, their personalities, and work accordingly, you will never be able to get the maximum out of them. You should be able to tell them and take them with you and motivate them, right? So if a leader can do that, leader will be successful. Those are the essential things a leader should do.
When reviewing your journey, we realized that you are a risk taker. So what made you the person you are today?
In the corporate career, I would say the technical skills and the hard work and pure luck. But being an entrepreneur, certainly yes, for taking a risk, because we are doing very comfortable jobs, me and my partner, and we left the jobs early. That was a huge risk, right? Leaving that kind of a position at that time. And so, but again, the risks that you take has to be a calculated one, because in the industry we have seen a gap. So we wanted to fill that gap. So we came out to bridge that gap. So that's why we introduced Insure.me.lk, and it's a huge challenge because the biggest challenge was to get the insurance companies to show their prices online. Nobody wants to show their prices online, but again, we manage that. So it's kind of a calculated risk. Those are the risks that you have to take.
So you disrupted the insurance industry by introducing Insure.me.lk. So to what extent do you give priority to technology and innovation?
Our company was purely based on technology, because if you take there are two segments in the business. One is retail, one is corporate. The retail segment, there was no way if a customer wants to buy insurance and if he wants to compare, then he has to call at least 10 insurance companies and then get the quotations, then compare. And even to compare the options, then you have to do Excel by your own and then put the columns and arrows to see what are the options against the price. It will take at least 2 days, right? But then we designed a portal where anyone come and enter basic data like your car make and model and stuff like that. You get all the insurance companies with all the options. You can compare with the prices. It will take maximum of 10 seconds. So within 10 seconds, you have everything online. So with that, slowly and we use the online marketing, so especially social media, to get people to visit our site. So now we have considerable amount of site viewers per day. So that was a disruption that in the retail market, which was not there in the market, we introduced it. And when it comes to corporate market, we have seen a gap in the health insurance. If you, say for example, if you want to claim your OPD bills, right, you have to get a paper, attach the bills, sign it and send it. And we introduced an app called Digimed. So with the Digimed app, what you do is you just take 3 photographs of your bills, upload it. We have a team, they will check the bills, they'll approve it, and you will get an email and text message and everything, and the cash will be on your account. So that was the innovation in the corporate market, and the aggregator was in the retail market. So with that, I think we were very successful. Like there were about, if I remember right, 58 brokers in the market, or 62 if I remember right. We are now within top 8, right? Within 4 years. Now this industry is more than 50 years old. We are within top 8. Our plan is to be within top 5 by the end of next year. Technology was our key thing. Technology was our success.
some people say that insurance is not an ethical business. What is your opinion about that?
Ethical aspect in the sense, if you take, sometimes it's a misrepresentation, right? Because if you take a life insurance policy, in Sri Lanka, we don't have the independent financial advisors. We have the tied agents, like all the agents who work for insurance companies are tied agents. They work for one insurance company. What happens? He'll go and somehow he wants to sell his product. Say he has a particular product. If a company is good in health insurance, then he'll try. If you want a pension, he'll try and force you a health insurance because his company sells only health insurance, right? And in that case, some kind of a mis-sell could happen. You can minimize that by introducing IFAs, independent financial advisors, and that's something now we are working on for life insurance, right? We are, rather than automating the life insurance process, we are trying to automate the agent so that, then customer has a choice. He can select whatever he wants.
So the finance people in any organization are very unpopular among the others. So as a leader coming from the finance background, how popular are you among your previous and the present organization?
I think this happens because of, I have seen this. I haven't been to audit firm, right? Because I'm a management accountant. If you're a chartered, you have to go to audit firm. What happens is your training is such that you kind of somehow try to find a fault of the others, right? You take a bill is duplicated, there's a error in the bank reconciliation, some kind of misrepresentation. That is probably one of the reasons why accountants are not so popular. The finance guys are not so popular in the organizations. They somehow try to cut it and somehow try to break something, and then that kind of attitude. But for me, luckily I didn't have that training, right? I always look at it as from the business angle. What is the business needed? But you have to make sure that being an accountant, being a CFO, you have to manage the key controls. You have to manage all the risks, and you are the guardian of the assets of the organization. You should never forget that. But keeping that in mind, you still can be a very friendly person. You can be business friendly. The thing is, in all your negotiations, you have to tell them the way you tell them, rather than just turn a face and say I can't do this, and just tell them why can't you do it, and tell them why you are following these procedures, and it is betterment for everyone. It is betterment of the organization. I think if with that kind of attitude, finance person can be a very popular person. For me, I personally believe, I had a lot of friends and I was always with sales people. The challenge comes with sales and finance, mainly sales and finance, because sales people goes out and sell. They think they bring the revenue to organization. They think finance only records it. So whenever they want a payment, they think why can't you pay it? That kind of attitude. I think with a lot of discussion and probably the understand their characters, attitudes and personalities, and then it helps to manage it accordingly.
As a leader, how do you empower your followers?
I empower them 100%. Because as I said, as a leader, I let them learn through the job. In the job, they learn everything. I ask them, take decisions. If something goes wrong, come and tell me, but in little advance. Don't wait till everything goes wrong. The moment you feel that things are going wrong, come and tell me. So stood by them when the things are wrong, right? When the things are right, just a pat on the back, and then they will do fine. So always you have to tell them, accept fault and be with them, make your subordinates perform well.
Okay, that is how you empower your followers. So what do you expect from them as a leader?
Yeah, I expect nothing but to perform their jobs, right? They are given with certain KPIs, set of KPIs. They should deliver those KPIs. And the most important thing is the trust. They should not breach trust, because I have assigned them certain tasks based on the trust. In corporate life, so many things work on trust. So without breaking the trust, if they deliver KPIs, that's it. That's what I expect from them.
So is it always the finance mindset that you use to drive your employees, or what about the human aspect of it?
I won't say, because being a finance professional for 16 years, always that backlog carries with you, right? In back of your mind, you are a finance person, and then the way you look at things, it's mainly a financial way of doing things. But always as a leader, as I said, I always look into human aspects. When people are in trouble, you have to listen to them, right? If you're married and with kids, sometimes when your kids are sick, if there's no one at home, you should stay at home, right? There's no way that you can come and work. But I want to say that, right, whenever you're trained in a certain profession, it carries with you. Like even for me, even now when I'm taking decisions as an entrepreneur, it's sometimes it's went little towards finance, you know. Times we might have lost few opportunities because like we were focusing too much on finances.
So do you see that as a weakness or a strength?
It's both a strength and a weakness, because I have seen so many startups that has gone out, like that has gone bankrupt, right? There were few companies like even Anda investor in the same group, and they couldn't manage it well. Why? Because they didn't have the financial discipline. You should have financial discipline, right? That is number one. That will keep you going. That will sustain your business, right? Because you know your finances. Every month, and you look at your balance sheet, you look at your P&L, you look at your cash flows. You know where your cash is. You know what are the cash generating items and where you're going to invest, right? Without knowing that, you can't sustain a business in the long run. But again, in the short run, sometimes some decisions, there are instances where we have not taken those decisions due to being finance professionals, right? You know, too much relying on the finances, right? If it was a salesperson, just, you know, without, you know, looking at it, by gut feel, he'll just do it. So times you have to work on your guts rather than finances. So we are slowly training on those as well.
So as a leader, how do you balance the emotional and the rational aspects of making critical decisions?
You should rely on rational mainly. Like emotion comes into play, right? Now, apart from Inshumi, we have a chain of restaurants and hotels, right? We had a very bad time. Like we were treating our employees really well. We have about 200 people in there, but after East attacks, we had only about 2 months for last 2 years as a good season. It was a tough time, right? And then there's no other option other than, because we have started the business about 5 years ago. We didn't have much reserves, but we have to cut your salaries, right? Then that's how you tell your team. It's very emotional, right? They'll come out with all the genuine concerns, saying that, look here, sir, I have these commitments, and if you cut that, I won't be able to make it. But you know, in that case, rather than going by the emotion, you have to be rational, right? Fine for this person to feed his family, and just to, you know, manage these tough months, how much he needs, and then look at it and then apply a formula. Can't help it. So you have to work with both your brain and your heart.
Human capital is the most important factor in an organization. So as a finance guy, obviously you are giving the priority to the finance aspect of it. So can you tell us about the method and tactics that you are using to lead people and to develop your networks?
As a professional in developing my network, I used to do few things, like, you know, I'm a member of lots of clubs and associations. So that way I used to go around and, like, you know, meet a lot of people, right? In chambers, in other organizations, right? I won't mention the names, but you know, those are the networks where, you know, you meet people like every Friday evening and then go and have a chat, have a drink, you know, that helps you a lot. So, and if you take the Ceylon Chamber, the National Chamber, and in any other organization, when you're a part of it, like, you know, Institute of Directors, and then with that you get lot of exposure. And on top of that, like, there are opportunities for entrepreneurs to apply for networks, like, you know, there are startup accelerators. One example is Stanford program. We are part of it, right? So it's called Stanford Seed Program, right? So we applied and we were selected from Sri Lanka, right? Stanford is a well-recognized university, and they are running this program. And with that, I mean, you are open to the entire world. So you get world-class materials, the training materials, the trainings, plus you get a world-class network, right? You know, all the young entrepreneurs across the world, you know, you chat with them, you meet them online, and then, you know, talk to them. There's another program called funded by PayPal, run by Village Capital, and we have now, it was in India, it was for the region, and we have a lot of friends from Bangladesh and India now, right? So whenever we want to, say, import something from India, even export something to India, and then get to know the Indian markets, like when it comes to online marketing and digital marketing, India is far ahead. So we always talk to them, get their experience as to what has happened. If you take now Policy Bazaar, And Policybazaar is huge compared to Insure.me, right? They're very big. And we, rather than trying our own experiments, we talk to them sometimes, right? They're very helpful. They frankly share their experiences, what went wrong, and they'll tell if you do this and this is how they respond, why don't you do that kind of a thing. And there are third-party administrators in India, and so that always you have to keep an eye on those opportunities that are coming out. Like most of those programs are free. It's kind of scholarship. So like as I said, companies like PayPal fund those programs. So when you're part of it, you're open to the whole world. You get exposures like across. You don't have to be Sri Lanka. Like across borders, you're getting exposures. We are now running a startup, but in the corporate world, you are working for a big organization and you are the team leader. You're part of the team, right? And as an accountant for my team, one of the main things was the technical skills that is needed to perform the job, right? When they are starting as an accountant, they come with a certain level of knowledge, right? But the accounting standards keep changing, and there are new things that are coming, from various accounting bodies. So what we used to do is we get a stock of things, like the new things that are coming up, and then we check out for trainings conducted by audit firms and government authorities and others. So then we categorize people who are working in the technical skills division, and then who are working on pure financial reporting, who are working on budgeting. So based on the requirement, we send them for training. When you work for large organization, you have budgets, right? So then you have a HR division, and then you send the training requirements, and based on the requirements, they get their trainings. And then most importantly, the on-the-job training that they get, right? By working with us and then working in teams, discussing looking at how others are performing and learning from their experiences. So like two different things. Technical skills, you have to get it from outside, right? Various accounting bodies and other parties. And on the job training, you learn it while you are doing it, looking at your leaders, looking at your colleagues, and then you learn so many things. But when it comes to a startup, it's very different, right? Now for us, our HR department is a single person, right? Then she has to do everything like EPF, ETF or to salaries to all that. So we don't have trainings as such. But what we do is we have done something first in Sri Lanka. It's new for all of us. Even we are learning. So even the team is learning with us. How can you increase the number of leads that you get through Facebook, and how can you increase the productivity? So how it happens is end of the day, in certain cases, we let our call center agent, the call center salesperson, to listen to his or her own voice, and then then they realize, I have spoke to that customer a little bad. I should have improved. Then if I had said this, I would have got that business, that kind of thing. So on the job training with technology, they learn a lot. And because being an accountant, we analyze a lot of data. We go into details, we analyze through columns and rows and everything, all the cost aspects, which is productive, how can we improve the productivity, if a sale is going out, why can it again goes to a queue with follow-ups. So that with us, our teams are also learning, from the lowest person in the organization to the highest person in the organization, we learn together. That's a typical startup culture. If you even on the other side, even for corporate sale, how it happens is, now being an accountant, now I'm doing the corporate sales. We go with our team. We take the seniors with us. We do the presentations, and then seniors listen, right? So and then the moment we win an account, we totally hand it over to our team, so that they will manage it. So with that, they learn best. And then now I would say, without a fear, at least now there are 2-3 people in the corporate division. They can do a sale by themselves. So I think that's the best learning that one could have, learning the sales skills.
What is your best strategic implementation that the organization benefited the most? So
in our startup, there were a few things now. We did something first time in Asia, right? If you are running on a third-party insurance, you don't have cash to buy a full comprehensive insurance. We call it full insurance, right? We saw the need if someone is running on third-party, right? And by running on third-party, he's taking a huge risk, right? If you go out in the highway, If you meet an accident, your car can be a total loss, right? It's a huge loss which you can't bear. So, but again, your car might be 75% of the time your car is at home, but once in a while you go out. So why can't you have a third-party insurance, and only for the days that you're running out, you get a comprehensive insurance? And for that, we came out with a strategy. That was the problem. Our solution was, right, we talked to 3 insurance companies, we got them on board, and we developed a product. So with your mobile phone, with your smartphone, it's just a matter of taking 4 or 5 photographs, and from that moment onwards, you can buy an insurance car for 24 hours. You can buy it in multiples of 24 hours. Like you can buy it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, like minimum 1 day, up to, if I remember right, up to maximum 30 days. So that was the solution, right? That was first time in Asia, and we implemented it, and it was well taken by the market. So even without promoting much, we are getting sales for that product, which means there's a need. I think in a startup life, that was the best implementation that we did.
So what you meant was the best strategy that you came up with was sensing and identifying the market needs.
Yeah, basically, it's a need in the market. I think essentially an entrepreneur is someone, who see a gap in the market, who see a problem in the market, and who fulfills that, who fills that gap, right? It's like business can be trading, like buying and sell. You buy something and sell something. It's not a real entrepreneurial skill. Real entrepreneurs will see a gap in the market, see a problem in the market, then find a solution that you can sustain in the long run.
As a serial entrepreneur, what is your approach to protect the environment while striving for profits?
Throughout my career, I work in service organizations, like even Insure is a service organization, but there's nothing much that do any negative impact to the environment, which is harm to the environment. But in our hotels industry, there's a lot. We are very careful of that. Like I would say, with a lot of certainty, I can say we are one of the very few people in Alla to get the drainage water, clean it and send it out. And there are so many others who just get their waste and just send it to nearby streams and stuff like that, which is very bad. Another example is in Singaraja, right? We have a hotel in the rainforest. So that's, I would say, it's near, by one side it's bordering the rainforest, on the other side it's bordering the river. So you have to act very, very responsibly. And if you go and ask the villagers who live nearby, like who the most responsible hotel is, they'll, without a problem, they'll mention our name, because we love environment. For me, I used to be I love photography. Now I don't have time to do it, right? I was a nature photographer as well. So we care about the environment, especially the waste water and the waste, how you dump your waste, how you dump your wastewater. And we are now in the process of, because there are certain schemes, purify the pure, 100% purification, water purification plants. We are in the process of building one as well. And not only that, the education, right? We work with the villagers, and then they sometimes have facility to cut trees and widen the roads. We were always against that, and we work with them, especially on the road projects. We work with them and tell them the importance of the environment, and then work with a lot of tour guides, especially in the rainforest area. Work with the nature, and we never build anything against the regulation. If you travel around that area, you will see how we have located our buildings against the others, right? We always get the approvals from the environment authorities and the forest conservation too. So that's how we protect the environment.
So you said that you are educating village people to protect the environment. So what is your view on corporate social responsibility?
It might change from person to person. For some, it's just you give something or donate something and post it on Facebook. We don't believe in that, because pre-COVID and the pre-East attacks, the first time I mentioned this on any kind of a media, we had a program called Yate Veenata Hiruweliya. It involves, we never posted on the Facebook. If you check our Facebook, there's nothing about that. We select a school which is underprivileged without much facilities. Like, you know, to name few, we went to Panama Sinhala Mahavidyalaya, Debala Mahavidyalaya. We went to Hambantota in Kumana area. We went to Deniyaya. We select a school. We not only give them books, we give them the school needs. We select about 100 children and give them, you know, shoes and books and stuff like that. Not only that, but we take people from Colombo, right? People like, you know, not from Colombo, like, you know, people like Mahendra Prasad Masimbula, Ratnasri Vijay Singh. We take them with us and then, you know, teach these kids the importance of the culture, you know, importance of the history, you know, why should you learn that, you know, and how the things are changing, you know, how to love things, you know, how to love the environment, you know, how to behave. Like, in one instance, I'll tell you, in the Panama campaign that we did, we had our friends, like, you know, we have few doctors who are friends, they joined with us. Like about 3 doctors came with us, and then, you know, they diagnosed 3 kids with eye problems. They said, they were so lucky we had this program. If we have not diagnosed that issue, they might be completely blind after about 10-15 years. You know, those are the pathetic issues. That's how we do CSR. We look at the end impact. You know, by doing it, you know, just by, as they said, like, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So that's our focus. You know, I believe in that.
As a leader, what are the challenges that you face during your career, especially during this COVID-19, the pandemic that you're facing with, and what are the strategies that you used or are currently using to overcome that?
When it comes to being an entrepreneur, as you said, the COVID-19, the post-East attacks and the COVID-19, with that, mainly our tourism business, like, we were doing so well. So it, like, you know, overnight it just went down. And then one thing is the mental agony that you have, right? It's tough because we used to earn money and then invest in a hotel kind of every year, and then, you know, go around and suddenly you see the places are empty. Like in Alla, we have about 200 seats. Like, you know, in the season you go out and you see, you know, it's full of foreigners and suddenly it's totally empty. One thing, your mental challenge against, and then the people who work for you, because they look up for you, right? They're looking for answers. So what's going to happen? So what will happen to our jobs, right? It's very emotional as well, and I mean, we are in the process of, you know, getting solutions and facing those challenges. I would rather say we have been able to manage it well, because at least more than 80% of our staff is still working and we are paying them. I think after the lockdown with the locals, we were doing well, and then we have been able to give them the full salaries after that. Again, now it's another challenge. But the biggest learning is, you know, if you go through this, now I think it's about from March to now, more than 6 or 7 months has gone. Say by mid next year it's going to start. Like, the mental strength you gain going through this agony will help you to do anything, right? That's the kind of a thing that these kind of challenges will give you. So for that, you know, the strategy that we implemented was, since we didn't have the foreign tourists, we went for the local tourists. It was working well for some time, and now it's a challenge, right? So now we have to look at some other avenues and wait for this. Probably COVID will not be there for, like, you know, years, no? Probably after about 6 months it will be over, and then we'll slowly, hopefully it will be over, and we'll go back to new normal. Yeah.
As a corporate leader, very busy person, and you are also a father of 2 kids, and we know that you are a nature lover and swimmer. So how do you maintain your work-life balance?
It's balance inside, like, you know, it's always you do something. It's very, very difficult to balance. And I'm a cyclist as well. I take part in long distance cycling. There's something called Race the Pearl that goes from Point Donder to Jaffna, and about a month ago I was riding from Jaffna to Vaunia, and then last year from Point Donder to Vallavaya. That's another hobby. So I do cycling. I mean, it's not that tough if you plan well, right? Now for me, because now it's times it's difficult me working as a corporate person, than being an entrepreneur, because for corporate person you have to be at office by 8:30, so until 5 you have to be in office. But for me now, if I don't have meetings, I'll go to office around 11, and if I don't have meetings, I'll leave the office by 3 o'clock. No chaos. So then you have a lot of free time. You can do whatever you love, right? And especially these days, right, when there's nothing, when you don't have physical meetings, because I am looking after the corporate business in my company, so there aren't many corporate meetings at the moment, and then it's a matter of firing few emails, and if it works, and go and meet if possible. So with that, I get a lot of free time now. With the corporate work, it was tough. To be very frank, it was tough. Sometimes you have to work till late and then come and But now here it's easy now. My daughter is doing her O-levels in Cambridge O-levels in commerce. I can help her without any problem. Teach her accounts, econs. So I get a lot of free time with that. So now it's easier to balance than a corporate life, being entrepreneur, because you manage your own time.
Is there anything that you would like to change about yourself?
I would have started early, I would have left my corporate life about 3 years earlier than this. That's the only thing I will change. Other than that, everything was fine. I've enjoyed everything. And if I want to acquire a new skill, it will be coding plus selling skills. I would love to learn coding, and then because I'm into this online business, I would love to learn a bit of coding and then to improve my selling skills.
Are you happy about your journey so far? And what are your future plans in terms of leading people?
The journey was fantastic so far. In terms of leading people, yes, develop, because currently we have about now 100 people, close to about, in my hotels we had about 150 people, and here we have now close to about 50 people, right? So going forward, we are going to expand the call center, so we'll be handling big teams, Inshomi will be easily be a 200 people organization within next year, right? Then segment them, getting the teams, getting the leaders within, getting the people to lead the teams that they work with, and give them the challenges, right? Let them accept the challenges and come up, if they perform well, give them even shares in the company. We have a plan for that, we already allocated certain percentage in the company for ESOP, employee share options, right? So that they'll be part of the company and they will grow with the company. And we will be the happiest to see they grow and being shareholder of the company, so that they earn their bonuses, they earn their cash by selling their shares one day. That will be the best development, right?
So to conclude with, this is completely out of the box kind of a question. So what if you become the president today? What would be the first thing that you would do?
I will change the constitution. But joking aside, I will, because this country lacks entrepreneurs. You have to have a certain sum of money that government will take the risk. If the projects are good, you have to give grants. Say if you want 1 million to start up a good idea, so government will give you 250,000 as a grant, and the government bank will lend you 750,000 at maybe 10%, maybe 5% per annum. So at least 1 billion I will allocate for that project, at least, so that there will be language is not a problem, across Sri Lanka, from Jaffna to Mahatara to Batty to Colombo to everywhere, the young entrepreneurs will come up. I strongly believe only entrepreneurs can save this country, no one else. That's what I will do.
Thank you, Mr. Indikar, for allocating your precious time, and it was really insightful and we learned a lot from you today. So we wish you all the very best for your future endeavors, and thank you once again. It was nice meeting you today.
Thank you.